years, young filmmakers from Southeast Asia have made an impact internationally. From winning awards and being selected in prestigious international festivals, as well as securing co-productions from around the world, their films showcase the unique talents from this region. SEAFIC's goal is to help the next generation of Southeast Asian filmmakers continue the region's cinematic successes through script development, producer workshops, as well as mentorship by international experts. As the first script and development lab of its kind in Southeast Asia, SEAFIC each year invites first, second, and third-time filmmakers with work-in-progress scripts to work with our experienced script consultant and international experts to develop and refine their projects. International selection committees, comprised of established film professionals, will select projects for the lab which show artistic promise and strong potential for completion. Once a project is chosen by our selection committee, its director and main producer shall attend 3 workshops held in Chiang Mai and Bangkok over the course of 8 months. The Chiang Mai sessions are held at the Monoceros Resort in Mae Rim. SEAFIC has also teamed up with Purdue Asud to conduct a 3-day program for the producers of the selected projects. After 8 months of rigorous script development and producer workshop, the lab concludes in Bangkok with SEAFIC Open House. This free public event, which includes screenings, panels, as well as a live pitching event of the projects developed at SEAFIC over the past 8 months, is a way for the lab to open itself up to the public so they can better understand the works that we do. After the live pitches, participating projects are eligible for a number of awards, as decided by our esteemed international jury.
I'm very happy to say that the Hearing Award goes to George Boy.
Hi everyone, my name is Kewi, the Program Director of the Singapore International Film Festival, and we're delighted to organize this virtual presentation to honor the recipient of SGIFF's inaugural Outstanding Contribution to Southeast Asian Cinema Award. So this Outstanding Contribution to Southeast Asian Cinema Award highlights and recognizes an individual's or organization's special contribution to Southeast Asian cinema. Besides filmmaking, the award takes into consideration resource building, heritage preservation, and promotion, among other achievements. So this year, for the 32nd edition, I'm very proud to be able to introduce the first ever winner of this award, Southeast Asia Fiction Film Lab, or more affectionately known as SEAFIC. So I'm very, very pleased that we have today the opportunity to invite 6 representatives from the organization. And first and foremost, I would like to introduce Raymond Pathanavirangun, the Executive Director of SEAFIC. Hi, Raymond.
Hi, thank you so
Hi.
much. We're really honored to, be the recipient of this award.
Thanks, Raymond. I think we're really pleased to have all 6 of you represent SEAFIC to receive this award. And I think I'll just start off by asking you, Raymond, first. I mean, since you are one of the founders and the executive director of SEAFIC, just tell the uninitiated, what is SEAFIC and what really inspired you to create this lab that you feel maybe is missing in our film industry?
Yeah, so what happened was really I was producing this project by Bu Junfeng, the Singaporean director, obviously, and the film is called Apprentice. And at that time, I knew about labs, obviously, I knew quite a lot of the people who were involved with the first ever script lab, which is called Binger Labs. And, I'm friends with people there called Ido Abrams and Martin Rayberts. And I've always really appreciated what they did. But, I didn't really have an idea that we should do this in Asia until Apprentice came along. And we managed to get into the Jerusalem Script Lab. And of course, later on, we also got the Torino Film Lab Audience Design Fund. And I think that the experience of doing those things made me realize how great it was and how constructive it was for our project. And there were really no opportunities like this in Asia at all, that we can basically have experts and mentors who advise us and like work with us, especially in the 2000s. Southeast Asians tend to be divided into two camps, which is filmmakers who are really like auteur driven. So the script maybe is not always the most important thing, so they're like really about the vision of the filmmakers. Or the second one is just filmmakers are always in a big hurry to make their films, so scripts sometimes just don't get the level of polish that they need to. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I thought maybe it's necessary to have this kind of thing, this kind of lab, because a lot of great filmmakers out there are not script writers. Like Ridley Scott does not write his script, but he still manages to make Blade Runner and Alien and stuff like that. So there's this expectation in Asia that to be an author, you have to do everything, which I think in other continents and other cultures in Europe and stuff like that, that's not the case at all. You're not required to be a script writer. So why are we doing that here? So that's why I thought it would be really important to have something like SEAFIC on, to exist. So that's basically the original thought. And then when I decided, one of the first people that I consulted with was Franz Hunkirchen in Berlin. And I said to him like, oh, I have this idea for this lab. I don't know, Franz, what do you think when I came to you? What was your what was your thought at the time?
Well, it was, as you said, I knew you were very, diligent and dedicated, and sometimes a little bit over the top about things with your enthusiasm. But I saw this as a really positive thing, and also the way you sometimes talk about, the whole situation in a way that I would not dare to be as blunt sometimes, but you're usually right. When it comes down to how you can move something, you first have to identify what it is that you need to move. And I just thought, okay, I have been working with a few filmmakers from Southeast Asia through other labs, Torino Film Lab, for example, when I was still working for them, but also Binger Lab, where I worked for like 10 years as one of their advisors. But I was curious. I was also curious because, I understood where Raymond was coming from with, the training. And in a way, it was also reminding me of the time when I started working with the Sarajevo Film Festival in 2003. They said the same thing. We have a region that is somehow not trained and has maybe a wrong idea of what they need to be in order to communicate internationally. And also, I have encountered a lot of people who, also from Southeast Asia at that time, who were in another way falling into two camps. Either they were not really interested in anything that had to do with, thinking about script writing, or they were, disciples of the alleged truisms of script writing as they are being distributed through all these manuals, which I find rather not helpful. So in a way, I was also a bit of a, having a message to carry. And I thought, along with Raymond, I think we can do that. And it turned out to be much better than I could have expected.
Franz has so much experience in terms of working with amazing filmmakers on amazing films. For example, Sebastian Lelio's Oscar-winning A Fantastic Woman and things like that. So, I'll be very honest, having him on board was also a bit of a credibility coup for me, which I needed to basically also get things started. So it was not easy at the beginning, I have to admit, because there were just a lot of like confusion about what the lab would be as an existing entity. You know what I mean? But the thing is, one first thing we knew that, of course, we needed to actually have some people who would work with us. And, we asked around for people, to recommend someone to us. And there was this, this woman who was still in school all the way in the US. And then I'm like, but she had worked with Electric Eel Films. She did like some of the on-set photographies and things like that. And she seemed to be very well liked, and was described to me as being very diligent. So we started talking to Palm, and we both, Visra and I both liked her very much. And so she ended up working remotely when she was still in school. I don't know how you felt about that when you first started, Palm, because you're probably like going, what?
No, it was interesting because the summer before you had asked me, I was just coming back to Thailand and learning about independent cinema here. And I had worked with Anosha Suvichakornpong, and that's sort of how I got to know Josh Kim and Raymond. And from the summer of working in Thailand, I sort of got to know the people here and sort of I was beginning to understand the sort of struggle the filmmakers were facing to jump from wanting to make feature films, like wanting to make their first feature films, or going into filmmaking in general. And so when Raymond approached me, he just gave me a call and he was like, okay, this is my idea. Like, do you want to do this? And I was like, oh, this sounds great. because for me, I was just sort of coming out of school or in school, and I was looking for something that I could do to contribute and help filmmakers in Thailand and in Southeast Asia in general. And I thought that it was a great opportunity to sort of learn about filmmaking through a different lens and to look at it from an industry point of view and sort of a nonprofit, and also workshop what that could do for filmmakers. In the beginning, it was interesting to see sort of Raymond's vision of what he wanted the lab to be, and thinking about sort of how do we actually create this, like the organizational part of things. How much would this cost? We traveled to Chiang Mai to look at locations of where we could host the lab, for example. So we did a lot of sort of research and groundwork to put together everything so that it would work, essentially.
But the most important thing that we did was really to plan out how SEAFIC would actually be structured. This is why we have the lab be 8 months and 3 different sessions, so that the filmmakers will come to SEAFIC physically 3 times out of those 8 months. And the times in which they're not at the lab, they're basically at home rewriting their scripts. So, and then of course, even when they're at home, they're basically like having these one-on-one chats with France to basically so that they're not left alone if they have any questions or things like that. And I think that this is something that France was quite a big advocate of at that time, right?
Yes, if that was a question, I can definitely answer. Yes, very much, because in more than one way. Because I thought if this is the Southeast Asian Fiction Film Lab, you are selecting not too many filmmakers, which is good, because I have to spend enough time with each one of them. But it was, of course, the question how to come up with it so that they would not feel just like single entities, being served one at a time and not connecting. And also I wanted to make sure to them that I am not, the guy coming from Europe and telling them how things go. Actually, the contrary, I was really curious to learn from them. So one of the most important things was not only to give them support, but also to make them, form a group, to get to know each other on a personal level, to learn to trust me as I needed to trust them somehow, and find a way to work with them that they would not be left alone too much. And that's why we came up with this combination of, devoting basically 1 day per project, but 2 hours of this 1 day would be a group session with all the filmmakers, so everybody knows each other's projects and they feedback each other, which was really important to me also, because listening to other Southeast Asian filmmakers allowed me to understand their way of thinking, which sometimes was really different from what I came from, simply because I'm, like an European, occidentally trained, I come from a different culture. I still remember, if I may quote this, because it was really a moment that I quote a lot. In the first year, Lan, the Vietnamese filmmaker, over a question that we discussed about, a certain type of causality within a story, he said, that's how it is with you people from the West. It's never enough to show you something. You always want to be told what it means. And I'm like, oops, yeah, you're right. And why should that be? And that was something, it was just one little example, but I learned a lot, and it was great to have this group. And,
we're kind of like a little bit of a reflecting wall, and especially France is extremely good at this because he asks the right questions. And sometimes it is really important that the filmmakers understand themselves intrinsically what is wrong, because if you tell them something is wrong but they don't believe it, it will never work, because either they will not make the changes in the script, or they would just make the changes but never believe it, and when they shoot it, it's going to be a disaster. So it's so important that it's reflected in a way that it comes from their intention of what they want to do and whether what they wrote serves their intention or not. And that is basically by asking all the right questions. And that's why I think this kind of lab is very important, is because we are not the judge or jury at all, right, Franz? Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think you have to mention that you also brought in other mentors who were not script writing tutors, but directors and market people, if you can call them that. I think that was really, the combination was important, because these people had the same approach. They were also not lecturing. They were also very curious and listening and contributing in that way.
We also decided to team up with another organization in France called Produire Sud. And Produire Sud is a producer's lab, which is created by the Festival des Trois Continents in Nantes. So it's a very well-known film festival that shows Southeast Asian films for like God knows how many decades now. And because the interesting thing is, and then Palm, you knew about this because when we started, it was important for us also to get to know the filmmakers, because we didn't create the lab, and I felt that it was important to talk to people to see what their problems are, because I feel like we can't make an effective lab for Southeast Asian filmmakers if I don't have any understanding of their culture, of their industry. And I'm not saying culture as in like, but like the film culture, you know what I mean? Apart from having, a good script, the next thing that they're really struggling with is having a producer. Because A, there's not enough producers in Southeast Asia, and B, there's not enough producers who understand how to even do international co-production. And I realized that, even if you have a great script and a very strong director, it doesn't mean the film will turn out well if the producer doesn't have the know-how and the ability to basically get things to happen, or to get the necessary finance to basically make the film that the director envisions. Because it's very easy to say, oh, just cut this, cut that, and make a film that is much less than what you had wanted it to be. Whereas a good producer is able to tell the director, hey, no, this is what you should be doing, and I will provide you with all those resources for you to do the things that you need to do, but you need to be sure of what you're doing. And that's the thing that it made sense to me. So this is why we decided, let's do it not just with the director, but also a director-producer pair. Because another thing that Visra also was kind of like asking at that time was like, well, what kind of metric are we going to use for the success of SEAFIC? And I said, well, I think it's important for me, and I don't know if at that time if Visra and Palm agreed, of course they agreed later on, was that I want these films to be made.
Thanks for sharing so much. I mean, about I think the genesis and inspirations of why SEAFIC matters, right? And I think again, learning so much about how this is a long process. I also know that you host the selected filmmakers to Thailand. At least that's for the first iteration. I think that's also, I'm curious about the resources that goes into this and the sustainability and essentially how do you fund a non-profit organization, especially one that such as SEAFIC that might not generate so much income in its sense. How do you sustain yourself, and how do you how do you keep doing the good work that you're doing? Yeah,
this is one of the drawbacks of being in Thailand, and I'll just be very honest about it, is that it's, unless you really have like red carpets and stars, they kind of don't really understand what you're doing. Even though we're technically a nonprofit, when you talk to a lot of Thai people, they don't really understand what we're doing. And even people within the industry, sometimes they say like, why, what is this and why? Because we're, like it is a development thing, like we don't have anything flashy. We do have, of course, our extremely important last session of our every year, which is called Open House, where we are public and we do like film screenings, and we do panels. And of course, the thing that everybody always looks forward to is the 5 filmmakers who's been at SEAFIC for the last 5 years pitching their project live. And we try to make that interesting and exciting. And it's always been one of the highlights, not for the filmmakers, they're terrified. But I think that it really brings in a lot of excitement and interest. And I think that we've been really successful in having open house be kind of a real highlight for people within the region, because especially in the last couple of years, we've seen people fly in from Malaysia, from Myanmar, from other countries, from the Philippines, just to be there. Because we do this open house, we are able to access a little bit more funding. For example, like the Thai Ministry of Culture, when we started doing open house, because they see as a public event, they were like interested to basically at least help us a little with some funding. But that's the whole thing, is that it's not good enough to just be a nonprofit in Thailand. You have to kind of show, and it's a very, very difficult thing, because we're not that kind of lab, and we also don't want to be. We want to concentrate on the work that we do, and it makes it very difficult. And especially during COVID is even worse, because a lot of funds are they have redirected funds or are doing different things. So the question of sustainability is really, really difficult. But it's we're really lucky, because we have a lot of our outstanding partners who have been with us for so long. But of course, Pure Foundation was the first, and had helped us for the last 4 years, and without them we wouldn't be around. But there's also other organizations who were there from the beginning. Japan Foundation, for example, and especially Asia Center, that Pooh you worked with a lot, and they have come in and they've been really generous. Pooh, you want to say something about the way that you work with some of these organizations?
I'm actually an art curator, so it wasn't, document papers is not good for me, but I'm like a content maker and also empowering people. That's what I'm interested about SEAFIC. So yeah, but okay, like Raymond mentioned that I have been working with a lot of funders, right? That also that I have been working with these funders luckily before, like Japan Foundation, also Goethe Institute, and I know how to kind of how to work with them, negotiate with them, or kind of how to think about how to meet their requirements under working under a non-profit organization. So that's not really hard for me actually. So yeah, but of course it's already hard, but not hard for me. Being a curator in Thailand, it's not independent curator, so you have to find your own funding. So and I never got. Actually, I worked with Thai governmental sector before, but it's like but it's so different when you are independent or non-profit. So it's a lot of, it's like especially you have special care and attention with your work, like when one focus on, and I also focus on, they don't really understand. So this Thai funders, you can really expect to get their attention or take care of whatever. So it's not easy for of course work with them, but for international funders, I think they understand more, even they come with specific conditions or requirement. I think it's reasonable for me.
And this is where Ning comes in, because she's the one who manages all of this. And sometimes I wonder how she does all of that, because she took us from this ragtag group of whatever to actually a real organization. And she's like, oh, you can actually apply for an actual credit card now. Would you like to? And I was like, oh, really? So each small little things like that, Ning was the one who was really spearheading it. And I think that without her, and of course there's just normal stuff like payroll and budget and reporting. Of course, this is something that she's also really involved in. But having SEAFIC to be a real organization where we have the basics is something that we wouldn't have without her. So I don't know if you want to say something about all the work you have to do.
I just happy to work with SEAFIC and be a part of it, and want to support everybody, and that is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for Ning, especially with this papers, documents, everything that's written in official Thai official language. I myself, even I'm Thai, I can't even understand. I have to go back to him. And then what does this mean? You know, in the bureaucratic kind of language, I don't get it. So, but Ning can interpret most of it for us.
I think that, you know, that's why I also like, you know, of course, apart from the international stuff that we do, I really didn't want to kind of like not highlight, you know, what actually keeps SEAFIC going. And, you know, it's why some people say, oh, you're just a lab, can't you just do it, whatever? And I said, no, because SEAFIC has become an actual real organization. And as a real organization, we have a lot of these things that we have to take care of, you know, and it's not fair to just think of everything as being like, you know, ad hoc or project based and things like that, which is sometimes I think an expectation of indie film people that just said, oh, you can just do it with this amount of money. And I'm like, sometimes it's really shortchanging a lot of the things that we are doing, you know, to kind of like keep things sustainable. It's why it's so difficult to sometimes explain to people why SEAFIC needs, you know, the certain kind of funding for doing the things we need to do. They just say, oh, can't you just cut this and cut that? It's like, no. It's really, these are not the right question to ask, because, you know, like everybody has a role that they're doing, and, you know, it's not like I just can't cut corners, you know. We just don't want to do that. I'm also asking our lab managers to travel more as well. So, you know, Dew, for example, sometimes he also goes to some of these festivals. Like, you know, he was in Locarno, he was in Seashores, and yeah, you know, I haven't talked to you yet, Dew, because of course after Palm, she left to kind of like work more on her career as a filmmaker and also doing other things. We asked Dew to join as the new lab manager, and he's not new anymore. He's been here for quite a number of years now. But yeah, so I've also been asking him to also meet a lot more filmmakers as a result. So yeah.
I always felt like SEAFIC was a community where was a space where filmmakers in the region are given priority, and filmmakers in the region are their creative expression is like being given priority and giving like protection, in not necessarily protection, but like it's a safe space, you know, for filmmakers. And so when I had the opportunity to, you know, apply for a job, luckily I was also looking for a job at that time. I didn't have any hesitation of wanting to join SEAFIC for this reason, because I felt like I wanted to be a part of creating this safe space for filmmakers in the region. And for me, that's one of the benefits of SEAFIC being structured as a nonprofit, because we're able to work with partners that, you know, even though it can be hard, but we are able to work with partners that missions can align. You know, when we want to work with, you know, when we want to help filmmakers, work with filmmakers, in giving them this space, this safe space. I think that that's the important thing about my job, is to facilitate the work between mentors, filmmakers, to achieving their vision. And, you know, when we have the partners to help fund us, it helps a lot in that aspect. Yeah.
But I do want to also highlight a lot of the partners that we work with in Southeast Asia as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, because I didn't want to also just talk about all these, like, you know, people who actually give us money, which is very important. And two that we haven't mentioned before that, you know, also were with us is, you know, of course, Institut Français and the French embassy here in Thailand, who has been funding us since the beginning and allows us to work with Producer Sud and Guillaume Manguet, who again is extremely instrumental in you know, having this producer lab that goes along with our script lab component. And of course, Goethe Institute, who's been supporting us and bringing a lot of really amazing German mentors. But we also work very directly with a lot of like institutions in Southeast Asia. For example, you know, I work a lot in Vietnam with a lot of these smaller organizations, everything from this kind of like a film school, like or a film house called TPD, which is in Hanoi. They were one of the first to welcome me, and they've been really instrumental in me meeting a lot of amazing filmmakers like Pham Ngoc Lan. That's when I first met him. He, of course, later joined us as one of our first SEAFIC directors.
Yeah, I think, but talking about COVID, I mean, and adapting to COVID, I'm sure a lot of things has happened since. And maybe on a more positive, brighter note, let's talk about surviving COVID and also the future plans of SEAFIC, because I think you guys just announced something quite new in September. So maybe let's share that to the people watching this video.
Yeah, so the last SEAFIC script lab itself was unfortunately done mostly online, except for the first session. And we were so grateful that basically we could do at least one session in person, because I still think that it's extremely important that we see each other, because you don't have those kinds of relationships and you can't ask those kinds of questions when you don't see each other face to face. I think it's extremely important. So while we are kind of like weathering the storm, we and also of course due to budget reasons, we had to also do something smaller. So we kind of came up with this new idea that that is called SEAFIC Seed Lab, and it's in many ways brand new because there's no other lab really like it. Maybe the closest I think is Cannes Critics Week. They do what is called the next step, where they invite the short filmmakers who were in Cannes Critics Week that year to kind of like attend this lab and to talk about what they plan to do next. And in some ways, we're kind of similar, but I think in some we're a lot less, because I think they kind of like a more lax in the way that they work with the filmmakers. They just kind of like just talk to them. But we wanted to have a little bit more structure, because I think this is a good opportunity to have this bridge, which is never really talked about, because even at SEAFIC Script Lab, we already expect the filmmakers to have a fully formed intention of why they're doing their film, have a first draft of the script, and also have a producer present, which is not always easy for most filmmakers to even get to that point, not to talk about meeting the actual making the script work and then making the film, right? So what can we do better to really help, especially really talented and really promising young short filmmakers to basically get to where they want to go? And that's extremely important, because I have seen, unfortunately, cases where short filmmakers who have promising shorts were then swayed to making commercial films or films that maybe they were not super into, and not understanding that by making that film, it can completely change the trajectory of what they want to do, because they think, oh, I'll just make one commercial film, and maybe my second or third film, I'll make my own personal film. And unfortunately, as you may know, the industry just doesn't work that way. Everybody views your last film as how they're going to judge your next film. And if you want to make a personal film after making a very local comedy, for example, it's just nearly next to impossible to do so. So we want to basically have Seed Lab to be a place where filmmakers can talk about, what do you want to do? What kind of filmmaker do you want to be? These kind of very basic fundamental questions that I realize within our industry is not asked frequently enough. And to really give them really great mentors and feedback and kind of like workshops, so that they can actually find their ways by talking to us. And again, be a reflecting board on the things that they may or may not want to do. And and when I thought of this, and I talked to Franz and Guillaume Manguet from Produit Sud, especially because I wanted his involvement in it, we were very adamant that we also don't want to dictate. So if for example, if a filmmaker after going to SEAFIC Seed Lab decide to become a visual artist, that's fine. I think we have to be open to those possibilities and not judge them, like, oh, why aren't you doing a script lab or going to make your first feature? Because then we're setting also unrealistic expectations that may not be what the filmmakers ultimately want to do. So this is a very free-form kind of lab that I think doesn't really exist in other places as a result. But that's why I think it's really exciting. And Du and I are for the first time on the selection committee. Usually we're not. I always like SEAFIC to be very, unbiased, so that I'm not the one doing the selection, but because, again, lack of budget, this time we have to do it in-house. And we are in the process of evaluating right now. I don't know, Du, what do you think of this whole thing?
No, I think Raymond, as you say, it's exactly correct. I mean, this past month, since we've closed the deadline, been watching a lot of short films and evaluating a lot, and it's been quite exciting. And it's gonna be very hard to like decide. It's gonna be very hard to select for sure. But yeah, we've been having like a lot of very interesting conversations in terms of like criteria and all that stuff. And I think by the end of Seed Lab, it has to be, what filmmakers believe in that they will move forward to. It may be a feature, it may not be, but we still are very much going to maintain this aspect of like being what is it? What's the word that you use? Bounce board, reflecting board?
Yeah, reflecting
something
board.
Reflecting board. Yeah, and it's so that like before okay, say the filmmaker does go through this and end up wanting to make a feature, they know exactly why they want to do it. They know the film that they want to make. They know they don't have any questions come joining a script lab or writing a director's statement. They might, but
yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
They might, but at the very least, they're thinking about these questions.
Just to kind of like, in the end, I think that, when we started talking about SEAFIC back in 2014, then kind of creating it in 2015, and then officially announcing it in 2016, I think even then it was a very different landscape for Southeast Asian cinema. There were very few co-productions, and I think in the last 5 years, I'm sure you'd agree, there have been a huge amount of movement. And I'm not saying this has anything to do with SEAFIC per se, but it's like, for example, there are now like more funding availability in Southeast Asia, including what SGIFF is doing for shorts and docus, and of course IMDA is also doing co-production in Southeast Asia. FDCP is doing the same. We didn't have any of this at all back 5 years ago. And people understand a lot better the importance of shorts, the importance of development. There's a lot more labs now in Southeast Asia. And I think that this is a testament to, this belief that, we can do a lot more to help filmmakers and not just kind of leave them to the dust to do whatever. And I think that at least whatever we do as SEAFIC, the one thing that we make people realize is just that we can do a lot more to help filmmakers. And I think that has happened in the last 5 years.
For me, the interesting thing about this idea of Seed Lab is indeed, first of all, this transition from short to feature, and but also that you do not have to bring anything written, that actually you have to send a short film. Because I feel in my, more than 20 years of doing this work, basically all over the world, one thing that transpired is that for a lot of filmmakers, having to write early because you have to apply to something, because you have to fix things, is actually creating an obstacle that they need a lot of time to get across again. Because once it's written, it somehow exists. And you may be forced to write it before you want it to exist in that form. And also you're writing words, but you're thinking images. So, if development is really the enormously difficult work of making it clear, you should have the time to try and make it clear to yourself and get some help there before you're forced to fix things in writing when you're actually talking about cinema. So I think this is a really good opportunity.
I completely agree. And because what I realized a lot of times is that when people start writing scripts, especially in Southeast Asia, they become a lot more hesitant to rewrite it. Even if they know fundamentally that this script is not really what they want to do, but having to you know, for them to really having to redo everything is a very difficult thing for a lot of filmmakers. So that's why it helps a lot if we don't tell them to write anything and start from the beginning, which is just let them explore first before committing to things. And I think it just helps people a lot more to be less rigid and be more open to things.
Yeah, thank you for sharing so much about Seed Lab and the developments you guys saw and hope to see. And I think I completely agree with everyone. I think it's a collective effort. We have all seen how Southeast Asian cinema has grown, with the efforts of different organizations like SEAFIC and with the film SGIFF as well. So I think this very much sums up also why we're doing this, right? To share more, impart more of our experiences, knowledge to a wider audience as well, to our industry friends, and also why I'm very proud again to inaugurate this contribution award to Southeast Asian cinema, and to you guys, the SEAFIC team, who has done so much to over the last few years to benefit our industry. And of course, we hope that everyone grows together in the next few years or so. So I think with that, I'd really like to thank everyone, all 6 representatives from the SEAFIC team, Raymond, Dew, Franz, Pom, Sasikan, Panwadi, everyone here. And again, thank you for joining us for this virtual presentation, and we will see you at the film festival, the Singapore International Film Festival. And thank you, and see you around. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.